The way we teach music is that if children play a wrong note, we scold them and we say you have to practice more. We have a friend named Victor Wooten, and he started learning to play when he was 2. He learned music differently than almost anybody else in contemporary society learns it, which is that his 4 older brothers who taught him to play, if he made a mistake, they just made the mistake along with it. If you're talking to a 2 or a 3-year-old and you're trying to teach them the word blanket, and instead of blanket, they say blinky, what happens? Everybody in the family starts calling it a blinky. And it's a blinky in your family, maybe even to your 30 or 40 years old, it's your blinky, right? You don't correct the kid.
Yeah.
And you don't say to a kid, I'm sorry, you can't talk to adults, you're not good enough yet. But we do that with music, and it's a shame.
Well, in case you're lost, you're here, San Francisco's Commonwealth Club. My name is Carlos Reyes, and we are here. Go ahead, applaud, go ahead. And we are here for the latest book of Dr. Daniel Levitin. And that's pretty exciting. We're going to get into it. I have some house cleaning that we need to get to first. It says, the club would like to thank the Bernard Osher Foundation for supporting this Good Lit event. And before we get started, tonight's program is being recorded, so we kindly ask that you silence your phones for the duration of our program. Also, if you have any questions for Daniel, please fill them out on the cards that you should have there on your seats. If you're joining us online through YouTube, send it in. Anyway, how many people know about Daniel Levitin? That's great, that's great. Well, before we get started with Daniel, I want to tell you a little story, because tonight's about music, medicine, and healing. A little story. It's about a man and a child. This man from a third world country is one of the first people to travel through the whole world and take his music out there and become famous. A lot of experiences, a lot of hurt, a lot of beautiful moments. Comes back to his country at 50, gets married, and has his first child. With his wife, a singer, they set up a nightclub in this third world country. He does great. They love his music. She is the hostess. Everybody just loves her. She becomes pregnant, expecting the first child. And right about that time when his fame is doing well, the politicos, the government, shows up and says, my friend, well, they might have said it like, mi amigo, you're doing very well, and we'd like to have you join our party, our government party. The man says, well, you know, I've never been into the politics. My music has been for everybody, and that's what I share. And they said, well, señor, mi hermano, we suggest it would be a very good idea for you to join us. ¿Sabes? And he says, well, you know. So time goes on. Then all of a sudden at the nightclub, the men with the white linen shoots in the non-see-through glasses start showing up. You can imagine that quiet kind of intimidation. And little by little, everybody's getting scared. And they think it's best that you leave the country. You still have your passport. You can get out. He has to leave his wife, who is now pregnant, and leave. 2.5, 3 years later, they finally rejoin. He comes to this country, the land of opportunity, the land where you could take a chance. He had to start out as a janitor to build his school of music little by little. His son finally joins them with his wife. They say he's a prodigy. The son does really well, but because of all those emotions the man had stuffed inside, no longer a famous musician, he took it out on his child. although the child loved music. At the same time, he didn't. He's a little child of 3.5 playing. He was abused emotionally, physically, beaten. He had to be the best. But that child grew up, he did okay through his music. His music was healing to him. It saved him, he says. And I know this for a fact because that child is me. Music saved. It saved me. And so that's why I share with everybody what we do. I am so lucky to have a friend like Daniel Levitin. He can tell you what that means from the mind. He's got many books that talk about the brain, music, the connection of what that all means. And today, with this new book here, I heard there was a secret chord. I think you'll be able to get it there a little bit later. We're going to get into that. But let me tell you a little bit about Dan. Dr. Daniel Levitin is a neurologist, best-selling author, and musician. His research addresses fundamental questions in auditory memory, musical structure, and the connections between music, the brain, and health. He has published over 300 scientific articles in journals such as Science, Nature, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, Neurons, and Cognition. He is a James McGill Professor Emeritus at McGill University, founding dean of Minerva University in San Francisco, and adjunct professor of neurosciences in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at UCLA Geffen School of Medicine. There is so much I could say about Dan, but right now, let's bring him out. Please welcome Dr. Daniel Levitin. They're ready for you, boss. Dan, how you doing?
I'm good. That's a hell of a story
Well,
about your childhood.
well, we could go on to that, but maybe we will someday with these people. Right now, we're going to talk about how music has helped heal the people in the world. You know,
It's a funny thing. For most of human history, and I say this with a fair amount of confidence, most of human history, we've had music and it's been participatory. So some of the oldest artifacts we find at burial sites are musical instruments dating to 40 to 60,000 years ago. Bone flutes in Neanderthal burial sites. And you have to figure that by the time somebody goes to the trouble of carving holes in precisely spaced distances in a bone, by the time they get to that, they've already been singing or beating their chests Bobby McFerrin style or clapping logs together and things like that. And so music has been around for a very, very long time, but it's only the last 500 years or so of all of that time that the experience that you had with your father and the experience that so many children who learn an instrument have has become this separation between performers and audience. It was with the building of the first concert halls in Europe about 500 years ago that you would go pay money to hear people sing or play instruments. Before that, and still in most places around the world today, music is participatory. Everybody joins in. There's not a class of experts. It's something that is communal. And the idea that we have performers, that's great for us. We get people like you who are world-class musicians who can do things that no one else can. And I don't just mean technically you can do things no one else can. Emotionally, you've spent your life learning to communicate emotion through music. But the flip side of that is that the way we teach music is that if children play a wrong note, we scold them and we say, you have to practice more. We have a friend named Victor Wooten, and he started learning to play when he was 2. And he learned music differently than almost anybody else in contemporary society learns it, which is that his brothers, his 4 older brothers who taught him to play.
He was the baby of the whole.
He was the baby, yeah. If he made a mistake, they just made the mistake along with him. It's like if you're talking to a kid, if you're talking to a 2 or 3-year-old and you're trying to teach them the word blanket, and instead of blanket, they say blinky. What happens? Everybody in the family starts calling it a blinky. And it's a blinky in your family, maybe even to your 30 or 40 years old. It's your blinky, right? You don't correct the kid.
Yeah.
And you don't say to a kid, I'm sorry, you can't talk to adults. You're not good enough yet. But we do that with music, and it's a shame. And I think part of music's healing power came from the community of it. When we look back in history, historical times, and again, still most places in the world today, when someone is sick, 20,000 years ago, or in pre-industrial societies now scattered around the world, if somebody's sick, the whole community gets together, and they sing and they play music and they try to heal the person. And some of that healing effect has to come from the fact that everybody in the community is rooting for you. I mean, that's a very strong motivator.
Yeah, I remember in the beginning days of AIDS, don't touch them, don't look at them, don't be in the same room. We didn't know. It was
like the early days of COVID. You didn't know how
we had no idea.
Yeah.
And finally, somebody had enough nerve to push the envelope. And I remember meeting this person, and they said at Stanford, they got people just to put their hands on a patient. And they could see the white cells change. Their breathing changed. The experience, from my own experience of being with someone when they're ready to pass and playing and putting your hand on them, and you could see the monitors just change and go down. And that is so powerful, so powerful. Why is it that just now in these last maybe 20 years, we've had little bits like after World War II, like you were telling me, that the music therapy was big for a lot of veterans. But it seems like just now in the last 20 some odd years, there's been a little bit more acceptance. Whereas in Europe, places like that, it's been there all this time.
Yeah. Well, part of the problem is that we want to know that something actually works and that it works better than other things. So there weren't really very robust ways of testing the effects of music on health until somewhat recently. And even if you could show that music can help with wellness or recovery from injury, pain, disease, and preventing disease in the first place, even if you could show that, we didn't understand the mechanisms, what was actually going on in the brain and body. And without understanding the mechanisms, it's hard to get people to take it seriously. The problem that we have in medical research in general is that placebo effects are very, very strong. So let's take chronic pain as an example. And I'm coming around to your question the long way around, if you don't mind the scenic route. Take chronic pain. Chronic pain is a $680 billion drain on the U.S. economy every year, with time lost from work, products to treat the pain, doctor visits, and all of this. Chronic pain or short-term acute pain is the number one reason people go to the doctors. My doctor friends say 8 out of 10 people who make an appointment with them make an appointment because something hurts. And the most effective treatment we have for pain are opiates, Vicodin, OxyContin, various opioids. And they work only 40% of the time. Not very effective. Placebo, you give somebody a pill, you tell them it's codeine, and that works 38% of the time. Talking about a very thin margin of effectiveness. So if music works, we want to know that it works better than alternatives. And the reason is that a lot of things that we thought worked turned out not to. our own history as a species of understanding the world is not very good. We used to think the earth was flat. We used to think that the sun revolved around the earth. I mean, we had to, the job of science was to dispel these myths. And there are a lot of myths about healing. No, it probably doesn't help to sacrifice your firstborn child if you want to cure your spouse's illness, and you don't want to do the controlled experiment on that. So,
thank goodness.
We didn't have the technology as part of the problem, and then brain imaging came along in around 1998, we could do brain scans and we could map what was going on in the brain. And then we realized, well, the brain scanning technologies we were using, we were misusing them because we were looking for where something happened in the brain, and it doesn't work that way. The brain is too complicated. It's not that music is here and speech is here, which we used to think. They're all spread out all over the place. But to answer your question, advances in technology and a whole bunch of really smart people getting into the music and medicine field in the last 20 years has changed things. And so some of you may know I wrote a book 20 years ago called This Is Your Brain on Music. And the book I wanted to write then was about music and healing, but the science was really, really bad. And the worst of them was the Mozart effect. Oh. So this was a study that was, I guess it was right, but for the wrong reasons or not quite right.
It was so off balance. A lot of valid points, but they were in different sectors.
So you may remember reading that Mozart makes you smarter. And the way the experiment was done is researchers at UC Irvine, I've got nothing against the UC system at all, but I mean, or against UC Irvine, but this particular experiment, they put people in a room and they had them do a complicated paper folding task after they had listened to Mozart for 20 minutes. Now, first of all, paper folding is not intellect or IQ, but the assumption was that it's correlated with IQ. And then they had a control group, people who didn't listen to Mozart. And the way the experiment ended up was the people who listened to Mozart were in a bright room with windows, and they're listening to Mozart, and then they fold paper. And the control group are in a dimly lit room that has no windows, and then they have to fold the paper. And the finding was, listen to Mozart 20 minutes and you get smarter. And everybody thought, well, why Mozart? Why not Beethoven? Why not Berlioz? Why not Bach? Why not Miles Davis? Why only Mozart? Well, they didn't test other music as part of the problem. And then a whole cottage industry grew up of trying to figure out, does this really work? And 100 studies have been done now. And it turns out if you give people in that other room something to do, anything at all, a Stephen King book on tape, a magazine, a window to look out of, they perform just as well. So it's not that Mozart made you smarter, it's that sitting in a room with nothing to do makes you temporarily dumber.
Great.
But this kind of thinking is actually what killed Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, as you know, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and doctors gave him a short time to live, but they had some remedies in mind, and he didn't like any of that, and so he followed a fellow named Dean Ornish in Marin County who said, I can cure your cancer with diet. And so shunning conventional medicine, which, by the way, is medicine, there aren't two kinds of medicine. There's not medicine and alternative medicine. If something has been shown to work, it's medicine. If we don't know whether it works or not, we call it alternative medicine, but as soon as it works, it's medicine. So he follows this alternative medicine, which wasn't shown to work, and by the time he realizes it's not helping him and he's dying faster, it's too late to help him.
It's too late to do it.
So all of this is by way of saying the reason we want to know that music as medicine works is because if we're going to guide people towards it, and they don't do other things, we want to be pretty sure. And I'm here to report that particularly in the last 10 years, there are thousands of papers that now support the idea that music can help with pain management, curing illness, disease, injury, helping people with Alzheimer's disease, boosting the immune system so that you don't get sick in the first place. All of this is because music activates every area of the brain we've so far mapped, and different kinds of music are doing different things. There were 8,000 papers published in the last 2 years alone on medical applications of music, and that's just in the open access peer-reviewed journals. I read about 4,000 papers for this book. There's a very fat note section at the end of the book that my publisher said, "Do we really have to include that? Because it makes the book look fat." And I said, "Well, yeah, but people need to know that it's really there." And they said, "Can't we put it on the web?" And I said, "No, just you put it there so it's in smaller type." So the point of the book is, I think, to explain to the average person with, say, a high school education, what goes on in your brain when you listen to music, when you learn an instrument, what effects does that have on the body and on health? And then for doctors and medical practitioners, people who work for healthcare companies, people in the tech industry who want to know how they might develop products or means of providing this as therapy. It functions at that level too. If you go and you read the notes at the end of the book, you can track down all the papers.
There's so much, like you said, there's so much information just coming out lately. In your investigation, in your lab, your science, what do you think was the first thing that you read from ancient history? We see shamans on walls in Egypt and different places shaking rattles and a person laying down to suggest that was healing. But what was the first thing for you that you said, yes, that's true, or this is what's happening?
Well, so we don't really know that much about sound therapy, music therapy in ancient times because unlike cave paintings, it doesn't leave any residual trace other than the instrument. So we don't know how it was used. But yes, we've seen in hieroglyphs and in cave paintings people getting cured from music, the Egyptians, sub-Saharan Africa. I think the Old Testament is a compelling story where David, the same David that slayed Goliath with the slingshot, David played the lyre.
A baby version of this.
Yeah, played the lyre to soothe King Saul, who apparently was bipolar and would go into fits of depression. And so David would play the lyre, and it's written in the Old Testament that it soothed him. And in fact, the name of the book comes from Leonard Cohen's referencing this story in his song Hallelujah. I heard there was a secret chord that David played, and it pleased the Lord.
Please the Lord.
And so the Lord lifted Saul's depression. So that seems to be true.
Well, I know from my own experience out there in the world that music, like a smell, you ever been going to somebody's kitchen or a restaurant and you smell something, you go, that reminds me of Aunt so-and-so or Mama so-and-so. Music does that to people too. And I know from people have told me that all of a sudden their body changes, the way they feel. Hopefully it's a pleasant experience. All that. One little thing that happened to me a long time ago, at Christmas, I went to play at a senior living community. And I was just playing solo harp, and in rock and roll, you have crazy people, and so this was no different. And they're all lined up there in wheelchairs, and this one lady, they brought her up, and they said, "Oh, can we put her over here?" And she's facing this way, in a wheelchair, kind of like where my harp is, but I'm right here. And she's about 93, 94, hunched over. She doesn't dress herself. She doesn't feed herself. They strapped her in. And I said, "Yeah, go ahead." And one of the things I found is that when you play music for people in that situation, you have to play real soft. And you have to play very on point. You mentioned those things in the book. Anyway, cut to the chase, started playing Silver Bells, third tune in. And she started going, and everybody went, "What's going on?" Kept playing, and I told her, move her over this way. By the middle of the song, this song took like 15 minutes. Her body came up. She hadn't spoken since she's been there. And she started saying, silver bells, silver bells. That music was in her. Somehow, it did something to her that woke her up.
It's interesting you say this. So let's talk about cognitive decline, memory impairment, and Alzheimer's, which is one of the most profound cases of music healing. So the way that music works is that we think that one of the reasons that music evolved in the first place, or we have music in our society, the evolutionary basis for it is that it does stick in your head. Human beings have been on the planet for somewhere between 40,000 and 200,000 years, depending on how you want to define human. But we've been around a long time. We've only had written language for 5,000 of those years. So how did we keep track of things? In song. We wrote songs that basically were instructional, knowledge songs. They encoded things like, this is the route to the well, and if that well runs dry, this is how you get to the other one.
Bards that were the original newspapers.
Exactly, bards singing thousands of line news stories. And we still use music today to learn things. All of us learned the ABCs to a song, right? And we learned the body parts. You put your right foot in, you put your right foot out, you shake it all about. And of course, that's what it's all about. So, where's the rim shot? So, it's the music is highly structured. The mutually reinforcing cues of rhyme and rhythm and meter and accent structure allow music to be retained in memory. And all of those elements of music are separate entry points into your memory system. So the melody of music gets stored separately from the rhythm, separately from the instrumentation, separately from the lyrics, because the brain processes those elements differently. And so as a consequence, those are different entry points into a memory. The other property of memory is...
Does everybody have that balance like that? Or some people more on this side or more on this side? Or
who are you calling moron?
Senor, I don't know. Just work with me here. Okay.
Some people are more attuned to properties than others. I know a bass player who doesn't really hear... he doesn't really hear... seventh and ninth chords because he's mainly keeping track of the
bottom end.
The bottom end. My wife doesn't really pay that much attention to lyrics. She's always astonished when I tell her what the lyrics are. There's sounds to her and they're pleasant. But yeah, we have individual differences there. But the other property of memory is that the stuff that gets in, as the computer scientists would say, my friend Malcolm, computer scientist, would say, first in, last out. So, or last in, first out, meaning the oldest memories are the most preserved. They're deeper down in the brain. So when your brain starts to degrade due to age-related factors or Alzheimer's, cognitive impairment, a blow to the head, it's the newer memories that you generally have trouble with. The memories for music from when you're, say, 10 to 20 years old are the last to go. So think about what's happening in an assisted living facility or memory care facility. With profound memory impairment, people may no longer recognize their loved ones. They look around, they don't know where they are, they don't know how long they've been there, how they got there. Terribly disorienting. In advanced stages, they may look in the mirror and not recognize themselves. There's YouTube videos of people like this who will pass a mirror and they'll start having a conversation with the person in the mirror thinking it's somebody new. But as they gesture towards the person gestures back and they think they're being mocked. It's terribly distressing. People have one of two reactions. They either turn in on themselves and become catatonic because they have no recognition of anything, or they become angry and agitated and violent, and they're often then sedated heavily so they don't beat up on the nurses. Both are really, really bad situations, but when you play music to somebody from their youth, it allows them to reconnect with the lost self. Suddenly they know who they are again. And they become calmer and more focused, and the effects can last for hours or even days. As Oliver Sacks found in Awakenings, as we see in the film Alive Inside, they reconnect with themselves, and that opens up the floodgates to other memories. And it's a powerful, powerful thing. It doesn't reverse Alzheimer's at all, but it makes the Alzheimer's manageable for them and for their loved ones. Speaking of Alzheimer's, we saw recently Glenn Campbell toured with Alzheimer's, and Tony Bennett was still able to play. They didn't know where they were. They didn't know what time of day it was. Glenn Campbell...
When they hit the stage.
Yeah. When they hit the stage, it's all there. And I was privileged to see the brain scans of Glenn Campbell towards the end of his life. Half of his brain was not functioning. But he was still arguably the best guitar player on the planet.
I talked to a couple of people that worked production on that show. And he had his daughter with him and his son.
And his wife, Kim.
And his wife, right. And there's a couple of videos. Prepare yourself. You can see them on YouTube. They walk them out, and of course, a standing ovation. Here's a guy who didn't read music and played on so many hits, it's too many to number. They walk him out, they sit him down, they give him his guitar, and his daughter sits next to him, kind of behind him, and starts telling him the lyrics or singing the melody. And all of a sudden, you can see his body goes. Yeah, he starts playing like it's Glenn Campbell. And then he stops, and he kind of like.
And then he might play that same song again,
Yeah.
because he forgot that he just played it.
Yeah.
I might play it 3 times, but he was spot on.
But when he was doing, and when he did that, of the fast runs and everything, which you have so much of your brain, your body parts, everything, your muscles that you have to have in control. They were right there. That stuff is what makes me cry going, okay, maybe a little help from up there, and music is so powerful.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, it's never too late to learn an instrument. It is never too late. And if you already play an instrument, it's not too late to learn a new one or learn new pieces or new style. And that is neuroprotective from what we've seen. It creates new neural pathways. Among the many myths we hear about the brain, you only use 10% of your brain. That's not true. You don't grow new neurons. That's not true. You're probably growing 600 every night.
Oh, and the left-right myth.
Yeah, no, not true. No.
Yeah,
I mean, there are hemispheric differences, but music is everywhere.
Right.
The idea is that if you can learn something new and create new neural connections, that strengthens the brain. It gives you cognitive reserve, which is akin to take a marathon runner who can run 26 miles on a bad day with a cold and a sprained ankle. They can probably still run 6 miles faster than me. They've got this athletic reserve. And so cognitive reserve is the same thing. And learning new things builds up cognitive reserve. It doesn't have to be music. But the advantage of music is that it has all this eye-hand coordination, motor control, and it's beautiful. I mean, imagine being able to put your fingers in the same place that Chopin put his, and to be Chopin for a few minutes a day.
I hear heroin can do that too, but
Did Chopin take heroin?
Well, I'm not saying. We talk a bit about healing properties and all that, but also for writers, musicians, lyricists, there's a healing component for the artist, the musician themselves. Changing a little bit from where we're at, but a lot of people don't believe me. I says, when you get into your zone, that zone of a musician playing on stage, not just myself, but a lot of people say they have out-of-body experiences. People who write songs, and some people have to just struggle and struggle and struggle. And then there are some that one little thought, boom, and in 10 minutes they wrote the whole thing. And a lot of them say the same thing. It released a spirit and energy in there. What is that about? Oh, wise one, tell me.
Well, to begin with, just to circle back to something you said earlier, you were talking about music therapy after World War II. One of the most profoundly effective treatments for post-traumatic stress disorder is songwriting. There's a program called Songwriting for Soldiers. It can be individual songwriting, collective songwriting. And a lot of songwriters write for self-medication or to better understand themselves or deal with loss. Eric Clapton, one of his greatest songs, Tears in Heaven, written after the death of his son. It was healing for him. Johnny Cash had this song we all know called I Walk the Line. I find it very, very easy to be true. I find myself alone when each day's through. What we know about Johnny Cash was that he had a series of affairs on the road. He did not find it very, very easy to be true. My theory is that he wrote the song as a kind of string on his finger, a reminder, right? It was aspirational. In the same way that John Lennon, who wrote Imagine No Possessions, turns out he was a hoarder. After he died and they went through his apartment, they found boxes and boxes. He had like 10 stereo systems, unwrapped, still in the original boxes. And he had all kinds of stuff, not just stereo systems, cooking stuff. He hoarded things. Mm-hmm. And so Imagine No Possessions, it's aspirational. It's that part of healing. As listeners, we can get thrust into something called the default mode, which is the mind-wandering part of the brain. That's where a lot of problem solving occurs, and music can put you reliably into that mode where you're not in control of your thoughts. They're sort of meandering. Reading can do that. Sometimes you're reading, and you find that after a couple of pages, your eyes were moving, but you don't really know what you read. That's the mind-wandering mode. It's a healthy place to be. It's the opposite. It's kind of like a teeter-totter, a seesaw with what we call executive control, where you're deliberately paying attention. You're trying to get your job done. You're working. And, whatever work you do, you're focused. That focused attention depletes glucose in the brain. Glucose is the fuel of the brain. It depletes your fuel. And after a certain amount of time of working really hard, your brain starts to wander. And if, like many people, you reach for another cup of coffee to bring you back on task, it's actually counterproductive. You should let your mind wander for 15 minutes. And effective people will take a mind-wandering break, either at work or wherever they are, not while you're driving, but you pull over. And if you have a difficulty flipping that switch from paying attention to letting your mind wander, music is a very effective way to do that. My colleague Vinod Menon and I at Stanford were the first to show that music activates this mind-wandering mode, and we showed where the switch is in the brain, in a part of the brain called the insula, which is about 2 inches below here, deep inside the brain. It's a neurochemical switch that takes you from one to the other. One of the reasons it's a problem-solving mode, this default mode, is because if you could solve a problem easily by just connecting the dots, you would do it by paying attention. It's the difficult problems that require that something nonlinear, that you think outside the box, you connect things that hadn't been connected before. Those are the difficult problems. That's why you're walking down the supermarket aisle looking for Cheerios, and suddenly a solution comes to you. Your mind's been wandering. A lot of problem solving happens in the minds of listeners, and it happens in the minds of writers, songwriters, whether you're a professional songwriter or not. You're working out your emotional problems, emotional tensions, a fight at work, and stuff just comes out. And not every song is written with that in mind. I don't think that's how Mac the Knife was written. That had a job to do in the film, or I'm sorry, in the Three Penny Opera for which it was written. You've got film scores where songs are written to move musicals. The Wizard of Oz, If I Only Had a Brain, was written to solve a script problem. But a lot of other, and there's nothing wrong with that, but a lot of songs are writers working things out. And when they can do that and touch something in themselves, often that touches something in us because we recognize the emotional truth of it. And I've come to believe that the job of scientists and artists is very similar in that scientists are seeking some truth in the natural world. Artists are seeking some emotional truth, whether it's painting or sculpture or music, dance, literature. And that truth can resonate with other people. I think people have very good BS detectors, and they know when you've found something that's meaningful to you. And you are great at this. What you don't know about Carlos, because he's too humble to say so, is that he's played on some of the biggest stages in the world, including Shoreline Amphitheater. He's played with some of the biggest artists in the world. But when no one's looking, he's going into hospitals and old age homes and playing just to heal people for no money.
Well, thank you. The one thing that's amazing, and I can see this in other musicians, and when I first saw it, I didn't understand it. My training originally was classical music and all that. But first time I got to see videos of Miles Davis, Charlie Parker. For people who don't know, these were some of the groundbreaking people in the jazz world. Whitney Houston, I got to see her backstage sing by herself warming up. All those people had this energy that you could feel it from over there all the way to over here. And they were just doing their own thing. I know for me, sometimes I'll play 2 or 3 notes, and right before my finger goes down, or plucks it, or plays it, or bows it, I know that it's coming out like an arrow, and it's gonna hit somebody. Or if I go up to somebody, I know it's gonna do something.
I was with you at Yoshi's one night. I went to Yoshi's 2 nights in a row, and I write about it in the book.
Right.
It's a guy we know. I won't embarrass him, but I heard him one night, and while he was playing, it was lovely music. Everybody,
It was a trio.
Yeah. Everybody was talking, and he was in the background, and that was that. It was fine. I was glad to hear him. I like his music. The next night at Yoshi's, you're there playing, and the room is quiet. Everybody's listening to you.
Little preface on this. This was right, I do main shows there, but this was right after COVID, and they had called to do something in the dining room, and we were behind a plexiglass box.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like the main show, but that night was different.
It was different. You and I talked about it after because I was so astonished. I mean, if you just had a recording of the music of the 2 nights, you'd say, yeah, that's great music. Both are great musicians. Both is great music. It's entertaining. Why is the audience talking in one case and not in the other? And your explanation, which is more intuitive than scientific, is that you looked out at the room and you programmed the music that you were going to play based on what you felt they wanted to hear. And you were watching the audience. You read the room. You're watching how they respond, and you're modifying as you go. This guy had a set list. And it took me a long time to figure this out. But if you have a set list, you're playing at the audience. If you just go in and you read the room, really marvelous things can happen. So Victor Wooten and Victor's playing Yoshi's tonight. And we were talking about this afternoon, because we did a show last week in Finland. We played the Helsinki Music Festival as a duo. And we had no rehearsal. We didn't know what we were going to do. We just walked out there and we kind of scoped out the audience by looking at what what we saw, the kind of T-shirts they were they Van Halen T-shirts or Willie Nelson T-shirts, all that kind of stuff. And we just played. Again, no rehearsal, no practice. And it was for one thing, it was so much less stressful for me because I didn't have to worry about, I had this thing in mind and did I do it or not? Less stressful for Victor. And I think the audience liked it better. And I think they were very quiet. And it took me, I've been playing in bands since I was 10 and in professionally, more or less,
You started out as a musician
Yeah.
and producer. And
Yeah, but it took me all these years to realize there are cases where the audience wants to be performed to, like Whitney Houston. They want a show. Beyonce, they want a show. But there are other cases where they want to be spoken to, not at. Mm-hmm. And that's what you excel in. And I wonder if you would play us something right now that speaks to us.
Well,
Do you have anything prepared?
yeah, sure. I think since we're talking about emotion and all that, maybe I can play you a little something. Music tells a story, but a lot of times, what it does, it creates, I believe, a background, a stage for you, the audience, to create your story, for you to have an emotion that's independent of the person next to you, the person behind you. And a lot of times we have a lot of ifs, and shoulds, and buts. No, you got to play this, and the classical world is very just, you got to be this way, you got to read the note. And I remember growing up and reading these reviews, and maybe I went to Andres Segovia or I went to Horwitz, and the concert was phenomenal. And they played two notes that squealed or they weren't the right note. And the whole review.
Oh, well, critics. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. But I'm glad you brought this up because the idea that music can be anything to any of us, I think that one of the big differences between music and language is that language generally refers to specific things. We have a word for book, we have a word for violin, we have a word for lamppost. And although in poetry we use language more loosely and more metaphorically, language is generally intended to refer to concrete objects or ideas like justice, love, jealousy, whatever. Music is inherently ambiguous, and because of its ambiguity, even music with words, because of its ambiguity, each of us can project onto it what we want, and that can change from day to day. The story that a piece of music tells you can be different today than tomorrow, even if it's the same performance. And I think that its healing power, I spend the last third of the book talking about this. I think the healing power of music comes precisely because it feels very personal and very intimate, and it's ambiguous enough that you can put your own story and your own needs into it.
And you get to own that.
You can own it.
It's not somebody else telling you.
Right.
Right.
And most musicians will tell you, Joni Mitchell's an interesting exception. Most musicians will tell you, you can take from it whatever you want. I've asked Donald Fagen, who was one of my favorite lyricists, what were you writing about in Steely Dan? What is this song about? Is it this? And he'd say, sure. If that's what it means to you. And when I said to Joni Mitchell, boy, I think what you're saying here is this. No, that's not what I mean at all. What's wrong with you? Joni is very particular that you have to interpret. She wants you to interpret the song exactly the way she interpreted it. But, I mean, Dylan, Neil Young, Crosby, Stills and Nash, James Taylor, Steely Dan, Rodney Crowell, most songwriters are happy if what you take from it is personal to you. Mm-hmm. And they intentionally create some ambiguity, not just lyrically, but musically, so that Minor chords. Would you play a minor chord for us? We tend to associate minor chords in our culture with sadness, but they're not inherently sad. Klezmer music is all minor chords, practically. And to me, that sounded winsome, beautiful, but that's me today.
It's funny in music. Every note has a name. There's a tonic.
Fred, Ethel.
Come back, Doc.
Lucy,
Come
Ricky.
back. Anyway, but I just played this chord. If I take one note out of each chord, octave, but I still took that, what they call the third out.
You have open fifths and open
All
fourths.
fifths to the octaves.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is probably the most popular in the whole world. So the same octaves. Where does your head go? Chinese food, right? But in Africa, that's an actual African type rhythm. Same thing. But why do we go there? Our head's programmed in somewhere in there we associate with that. Same notes, and we go. That's more Scottish, Irish. It's the same notes.
The rhythm helps, the articulation, all these different features of it help to push it in one direction or another. And you don't need to know anything about music to have different feelings associated with those things.
And it's also the other thing behind it, texture. We add a little bit of this, playing the same notes, and I can play those same chords, and you can feel hurt, you can feel anxiety, you can feel depression, you can feel joy, you can feel resolution. Let me show you. So here we are. There's a lot of emotion that we can create with all that. That's the beauty of music. Within that,
Yeah, play us something.
I
mean, apart from the demonstrating playing. Now, without telling us what you intend.
I don't know what I'm intending. So we're gonna make this up. Since the budget couldn't afford the whole symphony, we're gonna bring the whole symphony here. And Sure. I think before we play a song, maybe we should get some questions from the audience. Do we have some cards or something people filled out? Or? Okay. Let's just. Do we have some there? Oh, good. We'll take. These are the lucky winners with the Maseratis and all the ones. That's enough to get started. I know we're going a little over time. Can we do this? Is that okay with you guys? Yeah. Okay. Let me see.
Are we over time? We have 8 minutes, is that right?
Where's Cara? Is she? 8 minutes. Aquí tengo la gente, come down. Okay, gracias. Thank you.
I can do that backwards too.
Says for both of you, see? For both of you, can you share what your first musical memory was? You go ahead.
Mine is lying underneath the piano when I was 4 as my mother played and being on the floor and having the sound surround me.
Wow. And for me, it was my father playing guitar, and I was in the crib. And I was 2.5, 3 years old, because I just gotten here.
In Paraguay.
No, here, because I came and I was still.
Later, right.
Yeah. And so, about 2.5. Yeah, so another one says, do you have any advice for an aspiring accordion player? Next, should I take that or should you? Because I'm sure.
Some instruments are easier to play than others for most people. Keyboard instruments tend to be easier because it's all laid out there. You press the button, the sound comes out, whether it's a piano or an accordion. I think the advice is to play familiar songs that are easy. Worry about the melody first, add the chords later.
One thing I can add to this is that for anybody who wants to play a musical instrument, if they show some aptitude or if you really want to get into it and you say, I really like this, I want to get into it, take up playing the piano or a keyboard.
Yeah.
Because everything you need is laid out in a mathematical, in a visual form. Then, if you want to entrust yourself with with playing the accordion, you're getting that started. Accordion's one of the oldest instruments. We're joking about it, but yeah, just play melody.
You know what's one sentence that's never been spoken in the English language?
Go ahead.
Oh, that Lamborghini out there, it belongs to the accordion player.
Yeah.
What else you got there in the?
I don't have anything
well, we
else.
should play a song then.
Let's do 2 more and then we'll play a song here. We'll do that. Okay, this one it says, how many songs
does a musician know?
does an average person? Oh, how many songs, something, symphony, moments, etc., does an average person know?
Well, so what we've studied this in my laboratory. Musicians can know thousands of songs, and you and I have talked about this,
Right.
and I report a conversation
in
in the
your
book.
book, you talk about that.
Yeah, a musician like you or Shelley Berg, you can probably play how many songs from memory?
Right off the cuff, probably between 2,500, 3,500 that I can go, we nail it.
Right. And if you're in a group, you can probably fake another 3,500 because you know where it's going and they know it and you can fit in.
Yeah, once you get that structure and going, oh yeah, this is how I walk up this building.
Often when we play together, we play songs that we've never played together before because I've written them and you fit right in. You know where it's going. You hear it without me having to tell you. But the average, so that's musicians. The average person knows probably, I would say they can recognize maybe 2,500 to 3,500 songs if they hear a few notes or a few lines of it, and can probably sing from memory hundreds, if not 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So another one, we kind of addressed this one, but it says music and ADD. We talked about that a little earlier.
Music can be a way to overcome ADD, and I would say many professional musicians I know have ADD, but the music channels it because it kind of takes care of the. Hello?
Look at. Oh,
Over
I'm
here.
sorry.
Yeah. When they're playing the music, it helps them because it has this internal momentum, and so it helps them to lose their ADD for a while.
One question somebody asked me earlier on today over the phone, I'm not going to be there, but they asked, on the internet, says, if music is so tough a world, they read this thing I put about Snoop Dogg saying, how come we don't get paid what we should get paid with streams and all that stuff, which is another world. I said, why do you keep doing it? I said, you have a tough life and all that, and whether it's the scientific side or it's just the performance side, it is, instead of saying dis-ease, I think it's an at ease. That if you really connect to it, it's in your blood. And if you allow it to heal you, you just say, I can do this one more day. And we just keep going, and we just keep going. Daniel, thank you so much.
Thank you, Carlos.
Daniel Levitin,
Carlos Reyes.
his new book, I heard there was a secret chord, talks about many things. And I have to say, I talked to Shelley, I talked to Greg Field, and a lot of different people last night. They were
Shelley
saying,
Bird.
Look, yes. He's the head of music department in Miami University, and a lot of the big hits that you've heard out there in pop music, he's probably had something to do with it. They all said, congratulations.
Oh,
Have a great,
Thank you.
great night tonight. And I just want to say, Dan, thanks for being my friend and let me play my music with you.
Happy to spend the evening.
Let's play a song and send them out with something, huh? Also, Commonwealth Club, thank you. Thank you for having us. And like Groucho said, I don't know about a club that would have us be part of it, What
is a
are you
song-
going to do?
I thought I'd do a song that I wrote after the Paradise Fires. I had met somebody who was caught up in a fire in a cafe, and it's meant as a duet between a waitress in a diner and a truck driver. And it was inspired by this woman I met who was homeless after the Paradise Fires. And so it starts like this. She starts singing first. Standing at the counter at the Digby Cafe, I never did marry. My heart is a brand new cup, unfilled with dreams, so sweet to carry. His turn. I bring the coal to your cold house. I bring the fire to your stove. I try to catch your eye as you serve. Give me one more smile for the road. I pour a lonely cup of coffee, raise it slowly to my lips, like the objects in the mirror of the truck you drive up here. Oh honey, I'm closer than I appear. I know how you like your hash browns, crispy and well done. I cut your grapefruit segments and then I get that special spoon. You deserve a perfect man, one who don't drink or fight. But life's a burned out cigarette, and we all could use a light. I pour a lonely cup of coffee, bring it slowly to my lips, like the objects in the mirror of the truck I drive up here. Oh honey, I'm closer than I appear. One morning in May, as the roosters crowed, the kitchen broke out in a fire. Digby and everyone else raced out. I fell down and thought I heard the angels' choir. I ran to her, held her high across my chest, laid her down outside and kept her from the wind. Cradled her head gently in my hands. Her eyes were closed, her breathing thin. I poured a loving cup of coffee, brought it slowly to her lips, and as she raised her head, her eyes were bright and clear. She said, honey, I'm closer than I appear. We both said, honey, we're closer than we appear.
Dr. Daniel Levitin.
Carlos Reyes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Dan will be out there autographing some books and saying hello. Thank you so much for having us.